Bless you all for being here to talk about anything to do with finance in the late afternoon. I realize this is about as attractive most of the time as going to the dentist, but you're here because you know it's important. So we're going to hopefully try to get something different for you, some different perspectives for you to be able to leave this with a little bit more information than you had. That's the basic formula of what profit is. You'd be surprised how many people who are not in business, think the folks that live elsewhere from all of us, don't understand what profit is. I'll talk more about profit, but this is the basic equation. Everything that you sell minus everything it cost you to produce it, what's left over is net profit. What my main point is that as a farm business person, you shouldn't look at this as the recipe, right? Oh, that's what I do. I farm, I sell stuff, I produce stuff, and I take what's left over. The idea that I'd like you to go away with is that you plan to make a profit. Because if you plan to make a profit, then you have goals, you have expectations, you have things you can measure to see if you're meeting those goals or not, and you have actually planned a business. You have planned an outcome that is better than what you started with. That's the point here. Little history while I've got it here. This is an older aerial shot of where I farmed with 3 sons and wife for 30 years in New Hampshire. The main source of income was this little patch of gravel, which was formerly greenhouses. I'm confident enough to admit my identity is not going to suffer a crisis here by saying I was a cut flower grower for 30 years. And usually in my best John Wayne voice, I quickly add, and we had a few beef cattle too. And see, they're with me. They're with me. We had about, at the most, about 50 head. This area out here is, how do I say it nicely? We clear cut it. No, that's not the nice way. We are converting that from forest to grazing land. And there are a couple of other parcels separate from this. So the project now with my business consultant son is to prove that, yes, indeed, we can make money growing grass-fed beef in New Hampshire. All right, where are we going next? One of the most important things for any business is to have expectations, to kind of figure out what you want to do. And I think that at this conference, it's really clear that what the folks that are here want to do is make sure that their life fits with their farm and ranch, right? I mean, that's what we all, that's one of the best things that we get out of being in agriculture is that you have a chance of actually doing that, but you can't do it unless you have profitability in that farm business. And in particular, if you don't plan for and execute, if you don't have enough profit, net profit, then you can't keep doing what you want to do. That's my definition of net profit, is the ability to keep doing, again next year, what you want to do. If you don't have profit, you don't have choices. The opposite of profit is loss, right? So if you're losing money, you have fewer choices. Somewhere that money that you're losing has to come from, whether it's off-farm job from a spouse or partner, or the oil well in the backyard, the gold mine down the street, wherever, somewhere.
Land rights.
Land rights, yeah. Somewhere that money has to come from if you keep losing money. If you plan to make money and you don't, you have a good idea what happened so that you didn't make money, and then you can change it. The idea of trying to manage grasslands and be accomplished at doing that and not manage the fact that you're making money or not, and just sort of forget about that, it's incongruous to me. How can you do that? You have to plan both so that you can keep on doing what you want to do again next year. All right. You're here with lots of other people that are kind of sort of doing the same thing. I'm going to encourage you when you go elsewhere to find out what your friends, what your neighbors, I don't know, the guy at the airport that you're sitting at, waiting for a cup of coffee with or something. Find out how their business works. Ask them questions. You learn a lot about your own business by asking people and finding out how their business model works. And that if you're doing that, part of the reason that you're doing that, part of the reason that you're going into a conversation with somebody and learning how they make money and how they perceive the future and what their challenges are, is so that by the fact of planning, what you're doing is helping your mindset be one of resilience. If you plan for 5 bad things to happen, I don't know, drought, pestilence, disease, death, divorce, I don't know, there's a whole bunch of D's there that we don't like. If you plan for those things, then you have accomplished that, you have trained yourself how to plan. So you may meet some new challenge down the road that you've never planned for, but if you plan for 5 different bad things to happen, well, doing the 6th thing that you've never heard of is going to be a little bit easier. The idea of being resilient, of being able to adjust to what's going on, is kind of what we do in agriculture. We are biological systems change managers. How's that for a business? Doesn't that make you feel better? Well, I'm a biological systems change manager. Oh. Now that could be, I suppose somebody who makes yogurt is a biological systems change manager. Beer, I don't know, the guy who operates the manure digester. It's got nothing to do with what I'm saying. Okay, so if you have an uncertain future, if you plan for profit and you know that you're going into an uncertain future and things go differently, it doesn't mean you give up on profit. It means you change what you're doing. You change how you're spending money. You change the inputs you're putting in. You change your expectations of price in the marketplace. But the idea of being resilient is that you can change. One of the ways that you will, somebody, and this doesn't have to be a loan officer, although these are really loan officer kind of questions, somebody should be asking you hard questions about profitability. And this is a very non-farmer sort of conversation, okay? And not just because a lender usually asks these questions, is farmers don't like to talk about profitability.
Americans don't like to talk about money.
Well, yeah, the Americans don't like to talk about money for starters, but farmers in particular don't like to talk about profitability. What we like to talk about is, and think of the farmers that hang around down by the co-op at the coffee shop, and they grow corn and soybeans, and they talk about how, well, I bought my fertilizer at the right price, and I got a really good deal on seeds, and I hit the top of the market with some of those beans that I sold last week, and none of that tells me anything about whether they're making money, right? It's like snapshots of incidents of things that they manage, and that's what we talk about in farming. We love to talk about how we grow things. We love to talk about how we manage our herd and pasture mapping and all those. We love to talk about all that kind of stuff, but it's really hard for us to talk about, so how does that make me money? Because we're really accultured not to talk about net profit margin. And don't raise your hands, but I would suspect that there is a small minority of people in this room that can say what their net profit margin is from operations, because we don't think that way. It's remember that formula back at the beginning? Sales minus costs is net profit margin. It's not a complicated formula, but we don't do it that way. Even the best manager, right? The guy that you envy has got the 14-page printout from QuickBooks. Like, well, can you tell me what your net profit margin is? What do you get for all of your effort after you've paid yourself a salary, after you've paid everybody else who works for you, after you've paid the very qualified business consultant that comes and helps you? After all of those things, land costs, equipment, depreciation as a cost, when you figure all that in to a net profit margin, that net profit is what allows you to, I don't know, enjoy life, buy pizza and beer, buy the next piece of equipment, buy the next piece of land, or save it even. I don't know, maybe even want to send your kids to college. I made the mistake of educating my sons, and I don't know, it hasn't worked out well. Not that genetically he's probably a wise guy, but getting them educated, and it just makes it worse. Okay, so lenders think about all this stuff in a fairly dispassionate sort of way. This is not an exercise in how to borrow money. But if you think of your lender, whoever that may be, as someone who is a neutral arbiter of your financial situation, and what you're asking a lender in general is, if you're seeking money, is would you like to partner with me in this enterprise? And these kinds of things are what the lender needs to know in order to say, yes, I'd like to partner with you. Now, if you think about that, like this is all pretty arcane stuff, right? But if I were to go in business with you and I said, I'd like to have you invest $100,000 in my company, I'm going to grow beef in New Hampshire, will you lend it to me? You'd probably have a few questions, right? Like, where's New Hampshire would probably be tops on the list. And do they really have cattle there? But that's the kind of question that you would get being a grass farmer, right? Think of the lenders that you know. Do they really know what you do? You have to explain more. What a lender wants to know is explain it to me in terms that they're used to seeing. Do I have that on a slide? Explain it to me in these financial statements, and most importantly, for someone who is doing a different kind of business. Did I mention I was a flower grower? Okay. That's a different business no matter where you are, right? We're all a little, Columbia, I guess there are a lot of flower growers. Not so many in New Hampshire. A cash flow budget is how I did explain to my loan officer, here's where the money comes in, here's where I spend the money, and here's how it all works out at the end of the year. The more obscure or complicated your business, the more you need to be able to show it in a cash flow budget across the course of a year to be able to say on a spreadsheet, which is the language of the lender, here you go, here's how I make money. Here, more importantly, here's how I can pay it back. And by the way, when I can pay it back. So I know the terms of the loans and all those sorts of things. All right, last slide. The first thing on the list is poor records. If you don't know where you are right now, that balance sheet sort of thing, what do you own and what do you owe? If you don't know where you are, it's very difficult for a lender to lend you money. If you think about that idea of going into partnership, I'd like to borrow some money from you. Do you have a few questions? If I'm presenting myself as an accomplished business person and I understand the profit that I am seeking, my goal is to make 10% net profit this year, which is pretty high. That's like selling a niche market. That would be typical for a trout business, maybe. It would be typical for somebody selling CSA vegetables, small scale, at farmers markets. Who else can hit that?
I've seen a few low labor pick-your-own orchards get to that. But, high prices, really good local marketplace, loyal customer base.
Yeah.
And the husband and wife team who did it worked a whole lot
to be able to happen.
10%. They didn't pay themselves very much out of the business.
Yeah. 10% net profit is fantastic. Most of the world operates on a lot less than that. Walmart, 3%. Grocery stores average in the United States, 1% net margin.
Profit.
Net profit. Sorry, thank you. 1% net profit. Whole Foods, closer to 5% net profit before Amazon got them. Now it's lower because Amazon is lowering prices. Whole Foods had a higher net profit because they were a niche market. Most of you are selling a niche product. You should expect a higher profit margin. One of the ways to accomplish, and gosh, we don't talk about net profit margin. I don't know, benchmarking, what you guys do, I don't know. I've done, between the two of us, we've done things like local vegetable CSAs, not me, cranberries, retail agriculture, like a farm stand sort of thing. There are benchmarks out there, but not so much for what you do. I would put that out there as a goal for what this group tries to do in the future.